just hit the pause button here. Friends, thank you for joining us for another Crazy as Usual podcast with Donna Carlson, and today, Cyndy Sherwood. She's the creative director of His Healing Light Ministries, developing content and materials for the ministry. But she's been writing Bible studies and teaching scripture since 1972, and it shows, I can say, as a participant in her program. Her material emerged from a 9-year healing journey with the Lord that began in 1991. And as she was seeking the Lord's assistance in her pain, she discovered the truths that restore us to the fullness of life that He intends for us. I love that, Cyndy, because my foundational verse is John 10:10. The thief will come to kill, steal, and destroy, but Jesus said that I came so you can have life abundantly. And I used to wonder, how can we have that? and you've really done that. In addition to Healing Journey, you have the Freedom Journey and Resting in Jesus and Running with Horses, and 3 devotional books and a roadmap to healing. I love that God has given you the inspiration to show a path to that abundant life, because it is available to us. And sometimes I have it for a moment and then it slips away. And I have to say that going through, or almost done with the 29-week Healing Journey course, and going through that course myself has just reminded me of some foundational truths that I can go back to, review in the book, just repeat some of these truth-seeking patterns and climb back out every time I get stuck in that miry pit. And I just have to ask, I know you went through your own journey and you shared a little bit with us in the class. You could share whatever you feel comfortable with on the podcast. I'm curious to know if you had any monkeys telling you when you started writing this that you're not qualified to teach a 29-week course on healing.
Monkeys and humans. Yes, I have heard that message, and I never really set out to start a ministry or create a big splash or anything like that. I just, when God brought some significant healing to my life, I just naturally wanted to find a way to share that with other people. And so I just very simply started writing lessons at my kitchen table. This was before computers were used for literally everything.
Yeah.
And began teaching them. And yeah, I wasn't very far down the road before I started getting some naysayers or some discouraging input. I was looking for a possible publisher because I was getting requests for the materials, but it was just a live teaching.
Yeah.
And I didn't have anything to give anybody. So I put a proposal together, and I met with some acquisition editors, and I'll never forget what this one guy said to me. He said, "You'll never be able to do a Bible study that will be effective to bring healing to any kind of a wound. And this won't work. You're going to have to repackage this and just zero in on just addictions or so forth." Um, and so I thought to myself, well, that's a very interesting comment, because it's been working for every kind of a wound. I wonder if I should go back and tell all these people, no, it didn't really work like you thought it did.
Right. I have evidence.
But yeah, he was sure I couldn't pull it off, because I was saying this would bring healing to any life or any wound, and he didn't agree with that.
Wow. And you had the courage to go and do it anyway. Has he come back to you and said, sorry, I was wrong?
Well, no, it was one of those writers' conferences, and
Yeah,
kind of a one-time meeting thing.
I
But
know. I've done a lot of those. I've been to a lot of writers' conferences, and I'm
right,
sure they would have
that was
told
the
me that
setting.
my book wasn't going to work either.
Well, I would love to show him what's happened since he and I met, but I haven't had that opportunity.
Well, I think it's pretty amazing. There's a story about Jamie Kern Lima, who's a believer, and she founded a cosmetic company called It Cosmetics. And the first the first investor that she was this close to writing a contract with said, this isn't going to work. We can't support you. And sorry, but we have to say no. And it was devastating. But 6 years later, she got the biggest contract with the biggest makeup company and she's a billionaire now. And he came back to her and said, I was wrong. Okay. So I'm glad that you hung in there. Um, Tell us a little bit about, this is a podcast for female CEOs and people who have started businesses. And so this is the beginning of a venture that has turned into a business necessarily because you have to self-market this whole program, right?
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about the journey between um, his denial and your decision to go ahead and move forward despite those monkeys.
Well, after I was already teaching live for several years at that point, but when I realized the traditional publishing world wasn't going to necessarily open their doors for me, I knew I was on the right path. And so I decided I'm going to have to figure out how to do this myself. And that's kind of been the theme for the last 24 years. I've had to learn one thing after another, but I've just approached it with the same attitude as I've never done this before. I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to find the people that will show me how to do this and figure out a way to push through. And that's kind of my personality. I don't give up very easily.
I hear you.
And there's almost nothing about, other than teaching, which, as you already said, I've done since the 70s. Other than that piece, I had no experience with anything that came to me in this ministry, the filming, the publishing. How do you get a book printed and all these things I had to deal with. And so I just took it one step at a time and figured it out.
I love that you did that, and you also had to be forgiving of yourself in the process when you did it the wrong way and had to correct it.
Yes, I had fantastic advice actually it was at one of those writers conferences, and he said anything worth doing is worth doing poorly at first. And that advice was a magnificent gift to me
Good.
as a card-carrying perfectionist, that it was okay to stumble around and feel my way and figure it out and hone my skills as I went along, because there was no other way
Right.
to make a new path.
It's so true. And the sad thing is a lot of people have inspiration to do something really good and life-changing, but we get stuck thinking it had to be perfect. In fact,
Mhm.
one of my podcast guests said she wanted to start a podcast, but didn't want to start it until she could do it perfectly. And I just,
Doesn't work that way.
sorry. I thank you for being practice for me as I learn to do it a little bit better every time. And I
Yes.
finally do have an editor. I'm getting help. It takes time.
Yes, God brings the people to help us. When I started filming, that was probably the biggest faith leap for me in the ministry, because filming's so complicated and there are so many moving pieces
Yeah.
to set this up, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And I could tell you stories for hours about the filming, but in particular, when I started, um, I'll never forget my first shoot, and it was the day after Memorial Day, and I'd had a meltdown all day the day before, and I'd called my old therapist and I said, I can't do this, I can't do this. She talked me off the ledge, and I showed
Nice.
up the next day, and I got through my first shoot, and we were off and running, and we were down the road. We filmed all summer, the Healing Journey class. We were down the road quite a few weeks before my videographer said, we will be reshooting that first one. It was terrible, and I didn't want you to know that.
Oh no.
And so later on, when we had an opportunity, we reshot that first one. But that's just an example. We all have to start at the beginning on these new things, And that's the only way to go forward. And I got better every time I did it.
Right. Well, and I have to say, Cyndy, I'm amazed as someone who has done some public speaking. Um, when I follow along in my healing journey manual while you're teaching, I'm amazed that you know it every line. And I have a tendency to be more extemporaneous, and I just
Mhm,
feel a lot more genuine that way. But
mhm.
you are genuine, and you are reading every line in that manual. How in the world did you manage to get that inside your head?
Well, that's a good question. In the early years of our filming, um, I had an outline that I followed a podium in my Bible, and I would the way I prepared is of course, I had taught the class 12 times before we filmed. So when we got to that point, I was familiar. But to get ready for filming, I practiced it 6 or 7 times before we filmed. I wanted it to be part of the marrow of my bones, so it could just flow from me. And then I would read from my notes as I needed to, just to keep on track. Later on, we were able to get more sophisticated and purchase teleprompters and more sophisticated equipment. And that was fantastic
Yes.
because then I could be myself and really relax and just go with my audience. And when I needed it, the words were out there for me to
Oh, that's
follow.
amazing. That's so good. Now, we've been talking about the business part and the technical part, but I know that people are tuning into this because they want to hear a little bit about the hope of getting healing from the monkeys. And I'd like you to share just a little bit about how this study has impacted your personal life, your relationships, your relationship with God, with your husband. Tell us a little bit more about the real healing that unlocked for you,
The personal journey through all of this.
as much as you're
Um,
willing to share on a public podcast.
Oh, sure. There's no secrets anymore, Donna. I've published my entire story, so it's all there for God and the universe to read. So,
There you go.
um, yes, when I first began doing this, as I said, I was learning new things all along, and I had doubts about this working, this being good, this being anybody wanting this. It's just so, and I didn't learn all that quickly. I remember when I finally got Healing Journey done, I'm not making this up. I said, well, who's gonna buy this? I mean, whoever will pick this up and use this, it's not gonna go anywhere. Nobody knows about little old Cyndy Sherwood and her little old steady in Colorado Springs. And it was only a few weeks before I got a call from a stranger in Arkansas saying, I heard about your study. How do I get it? And I said, oh, that's how it's going to happen. It's just going to happen.
Right.
And I was very surprised. I was actually shocked
Yeah.
because I just didn't believe it could really get out there. I mean, I felt like I was being obedient to my part. And then I just didn't know what would happen after that. But that was I was doubting God and his power and his faithfulness to his promises. And this is a journey, I think, for every one of us who love God, that we have to learn his character and we have to figure out those places in our life that have marred his character in our minds,
Yeah.
those things that we don't understand that have caused us to doubt ourselves and to doubt him. And those are our wounds. And those wounds have to be addressed. It doesn't work very well um, to just spray perfume on them. Those
It's so
wounds,
true.
that doesn't really make them go away.
Well, and honestly, that's what a lot of people feel about the church or other Christians. Well, you shouldn't think that way, or
Right.
Meditate on
Just
this.
don't think that.
Yeah,
Just don't feel that.
my husband
Just
actually
don't have that problem.
my husband once said, "You can't think that." I said, "I do think that." So you can't really tell me I can't.
And it's just not helpful. And these are real wounds. These are real sticking points. They've come from real events that have happened in our life, and we are really, truly, honestly stuck. And so that's the hope in our ministry, is to bring an effective, safe environment where people can come and address these things, get the healing for it, and get rid of it. I mean, and in the Donna Carlson language, get the monkey off your back for good.
Yeah.
So the monkey isn't there anymore. And so that you can fly in the joy of how God has created you and move in the power of the Holy Spirit with utter confidence that we do what he asks us to do, and he takes it from there. And the success and the blessing, the expansion, whatever it is, all comes from him. We just have to be obedient in our steps to what he asks us to do. And if we don't get this healing, and if we don't address these doubts about ourselves, our our usefulness in God's kingdom, and his extreme pleasure and delight and power and grace working us, if we don't address these things and get to this place, we won't ever get to experience these amazing, amazing things God has planned for our life. So it is totally worth the time and effort to go ahead and unpack those wounds, apply God's tools, and get the monkeys off our back.
Absolutely. In fact, I've thought several times, and again during the study, I brought it up in our group, that the fact that I continue to struggle with some of the issues that date back to being orphaned and a lot of just neglect and abandonment. And every time I catch myself in the lie, I
Mm.
I have to remind myself, you know what, you must be pretty dangerous if the devil's going to work this hard to stop you.
Yes, yes, that's right. He doesn't attack where there's nothing going on.
Right.
So he only zeroes in when he feels threatened, and he only feels threatened when we're on the right track.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love that. So, has there ever been a time that you've gotten off the track since you developed the study?
I've had missteps with the ministry. I don't think so much with the materials or filming projects or so forth. But one of the struggles I've had is uh, CEO
Yeah.
running the ship here is with letting God be my provider
Mhm.
and letting God do it. And it's been a continual lesson for me because God has created me to be an initiator. And that's just like all attributes, it's an attribute, it's a coin with two sides.
Mhm.
And so, yes, I was created to be an initiator. So it comes naturally for me to start things and run things and so forth. But the flip side, the more that every attribute has a negative potential as well.
Yeah.
And that is to try to be my own God.
Mm.
And so if I thought, um, we needed more money for this, or we weren't going to be able to meet these demands or so forth, and I would try to come up with some crazy idea to make that happen instead of just saying, God, here we are. No, you're faithful and you're going to provide. And he has let me step into some of those bad ideas
Yeah.
so I would realize
You've
I'm
learned.
not my provider. And he let me stumble and fall on my face a couple of times, and I felt the conviction of God, and I was very sorry I did that. But those were great learning opportunities. I had to really get it into my head and really understand without doubt that God would always provide, and he might ask me to take some steps towards something, but I needed to let him tell me and not do it out of fear.
Right. I I love that you mentioned that, Cindy, because I am my husband calls me action girl. I have a tendency to
Mhm,
just move into action.
mhm,
And God has reminded me year after year after year. When did we talk about this?
I know it was a repeat lesson for me, Donna. I had 2 or 3 or 4, if not more,
Right.
rounds on this. I think we've got it straight now, but
Well, at least we're catching that flag, that message a little bit sooner and going,
I
hold on.
certainly
I
hope
think
so.
well, and I think that this whole the current illness that I'm battling right now was such a surprise. I'm a really healthy person. I eat really well. And so to have this issue that I have right now, I immediately knew the day that I ended up having to cancel everything and lay in bed all day. I knew that God was telling me, if you're not going to slow down, I'm just going to do it for you. And Psalm 23 says he makes us lie down by still waters. It doesn't
Yeah,
say he gently coaxes us or asks us, please.
that's
Sometimes he,
right.
he makes us lie down.
That's right. And he has called me to seasons of rest as well. And that's been a lesson I've had to learn, that there's seasons where you push hard. And uh, we just completed a multi-year revision of Healing Journey. And it really took every little tiny ounce of who I am to get
Yeah,
through that. It was so challenging. Um, and when that was finished, it was time for a rest.
right. Well, it paid off because it's very professionally done. I was really, really impressed. And I've done a lot of those Bible studies. As I told the girls in my group, the Bible studies with the binders this thick, I've done so many, I have a whole shelf of them. But this one is done so well, and your teaching is done so well that it's no surprise that God has multiplied your impact,
Mhm.
because everyone in every class knows people all over the map. In fact, I told my
Yes,
sister about it in Austin, and she asked it, well, is anyone doing it in Austin? I said, I don't know. I'll check. Where can people get access to the study?
that's a great question, Donna. We are very eager to see this continue to expand, and that's how it expands. We don't market it, so it's just word of mouth. Our website, hishealinglight.org, hishealinglight.org is where people can find a wealth of information about our ministry, our products, and our classes. They can find an area called Locate a Class. They can look up their state and go from there. But very likely, for instance, Austin, they're not going to find anything. And so the best way for people to engage in these areas is through a virtual class. We have a couple dozen of those every year, and they meet a very important need for people who want to take the class, but there is not one in their area.
Yeah.
They could, if they are motivated, they can be the one. Recommend they go through the class first, but then they can come to our boot camp training and bring that to that area if God should lead them in that direction.
Yeah. I love that, because when somebody discovers a path like that, like my leader we discussed earlier, Sue's a really great leader, and it's a blessing to so many people when somebody lives in their gifting. And
Mm.
and when we stray outside of that because we're trying to be something else, that's when we get in trouble, like you and I had talked about.
Yes, yes,
God.
that straying thing.
Well, we are like sheep, we
Yes, yes,
we know what
yes.
we need.
And then on the flip side of that, when we're right where God made us to be, it's the most beautiful thing ever.
Mhm. There's a real comfort in a rhythm of life that feels natural, right?
It's a great joy. Yes, yes, to be flying in your gifts and using all that God made you to be for His glory, for His kingdom, for His hurting people. Um, it there's just nothing better than that for me.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that you've invested your life in providing this healing. And a lot of people might wonder, what kinds of things are you healing from? And I've seen a real variety, from sexual abuse to abandonment to divorce.
Mhm.
Um, there's such a range of areas where we're really surprised, and we're surprised by our response. It's not always trauma with a capital T in the way that you would think, like a rape or something really horrific. But some of the trauma that takes place in our life is really just misunderstanding, right? Are there
We've all been wounded. There's no person on planet Earth who hasn't been wounded, gone through painful things, and had hard relationships. And we have that in common. And that's why those of us involved in this ministry feel like healing journey really is for everybody.
That's great. Well, Cyndy, if you could leave 2 or 3 thoughts with our audience about how to pursue that peace of God that surpasses all understanding, the life of joy that you talk about, what advice would you leave for someone who feels that little pull that they might want to explore this?
Well, I think a good starting point is just to ask God, is there anything in my life that really needs some attention, that's hindering my path, hindering my way? Ask Him if there's something and pay attention to what He might say. Something else I would throw out there is to, as much as possible, never doubt how God is for you and delights in you and is always there. He's never up there wagging his finger, feeling disappointed and judging us or anyone. He's always for us and wants the best for us. And he is our resource for everything. The thing I say most often, I'll leave with this, is begin your day in fellowship with Jesus and his word, and things will fall into place from there.
First things first, right?
First things first.
That's right. Thank you so much for being with us today, Cyndy.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It's my joy to be here, Donna.
It is a joy. And friends, you've been listening to the Crazy as Usual podcast. We're really glad to share this time with you. Check the show notes for how to contact Cyndy and join us next time.